This is not the kind of headline people glance at, shake their heads over, and forget before the next post loads. This situation feels heavier than that. It unfolds slowly, almost painfully, and once you start paying attention, it becomes hard to look away. What we are watching is the public unraveling of an image that took years to build, happening step by step, right in front of everyone. The reason it feels so intense is simple. Nobody involved is protected anymore. Every person connected to this story is being exposed in real time. What started quietly as whispers and side comments has grown into something much bigger. Screenshots are being passed around. Messages that were never meant to be seen are now public. Legal threats have entered the conversation. Apologies are being issued. Friendships that once seemed solid are breaking apart under pressure. When you lay everything out in order and follow the timeline carefully, it becomes clear that this situation is not shallow or random. It runs deep, and it keeps pulling more people in. At the center of it all is Claressa Shields. In the boxing world, her name carries weight. Inside the ring, she is undefeated. She is respected for her discipline, strength, and focus. Her career has been built on control and confidence, on showing up prepared and dominating her opponents for a long time. That image felt untouchable. She represented power, independence, and success earned through hard work. Outside the ring, however, things appear far less controlled. Her personal life has allegedly turned into a storm of emotional tension, shifting loyalties, and painful betrayals that are now playing out in public. Once private struggles spill into the open, they stop being personal. They become stories that people dissect, judge, and reshape however they want. That loss of control is what makes everything feel so dangerous. What makes this situation especially serious is how quickly it moved from gossip into something that carries real consequences. These were not light rumors or harmless speculation. The accusations that surfaced were not about simple misunderstandings or casual dating. Some claims could damage reputations, destroy careers, and even threaten someone's freedom. The moment warnings started appearing and lawyers became involved, it was clear that this was no longer just online talk. This had crossed into legal territory. Behind closed doors, legal letters were being exchanged. The conversation shifted away from opinions and emotions and toward responsibility and risk. This was no longer people throwing shade for attention. This was the kind of conflict that ends up in courtrooms, where words are weighed carefully and every statement can be used against someone. Then came the moment that truly shocked people. A person described as a close friend did not just speak up quietly. She went public in a way that felt explosive. The allegations she made were extreme and deeply disturbing. Claims surfaced involving underage relationships, pregnancies during fights, abortions, and decisions made under intense pressure. These were not stories people could casually argue about online. Whether true or false, they carried a weight that changed the tone of everything immediately. Once allegations like that enter the conversation, there is no easy way back. They forced people to stop joking and start questioning reality. Even those who doubted the claims felt uncomfortable reading them. The damage happened instantly because some accusations, once spoken aloud, cannot be unheard. As if that were not enough, the relationship drama became even more complicated. What people first described as a love triangle turned out to be far more tangled. There was a married man, his wife, an alleged side relationship, a fiancé, and carefully managed public images that could not survive once private messages started leaking. When those texts hit the internet, the narrative shifted overnight. The strong, confident champion image cracked. Messages appeared that made Claressa seem emotional, vulnerable, and even desperate at times. The internet reacted the way it always does, without mercy or patience. Context disappeared. Nuance was ignored. People focused on whatever parts supported the harshest interpretation. At that point, the discussion stopped being about who was right or wrong. It became about who was lying, who was manipulating the situation, and who stood to lose the most if everything came crashing down. When Tasha K entered the picture, the tension increased immediately. Captions were edited, statements were walked back, apologies began to surface, lawyers became actively involved. Once someone mentions receipts, there is no reversing the damage. Screenshots do not fade, messages do not disappear. The internet remembers everything. This was no longer gossip, this was exposure. At one stage, a public apology was issued. The explanation was careful and measured, not emotional. Lawyers had reviewed what had been said. One specific claim was identified as potentially defamatory and was corrected. The apology was described as formal and professional, directed at Claressa Shields, acknowledging that incorrect information had been shared. That moment mattered more than many people realized. The second lawyers enter a situation, everything changes. Rumors can be laughed off, gossip can be denied, but paperwork does not disappear simply because someone regrets what they said. Claressa Shields was no longer just trending online. Her entire public identity was being challenged, piece by piece. Each claim built on the last. One accusation opened the door for another. Slowly, what people were witnessing was not a single scandal, but the breakdown of a carefully built image that had taken years to establish. What many people seem to forget is that Claressa didn't step into this situation as a content creator or influencer chasing attention. She entered it as a champion. She had earned her position through years of training, discipline, and sacrifice. That kind of resume is supposed to shield you from noise, but the internet does not respect achievements when it senses weakness. When her name became linked to Papoose, a man who was still legally married to Remy Ma, the situation immediately became volatile. This was not a simple dating story where feelings got hurt and people moved on. Everyone involved had something to protect: reputation, image, leverage, and control. Once self-protection becomes the main goal, honesty often takes a back seat. That's why the accusations hit so hard. They were not jokes or exaggerations meant to stir drama. They were claims that force people to say, "This needs legal attention." When warnings like that start circulating, it means conversations have already shifted into private spaces. Screenshots are being saved, messages are being forwarded. People realize they may have gone too far. The story darkened further because Claressa was no longer dealing with just one source of pressure. The circle around her began to collapse. Remy was connected. Papoose was involved. Tasha K became a key figure. And then came the most dangerous role of all, the former best friend. Strangers can exaggerate, enemies can twist facts, but when someone who claims to know your real life speaks publicly, people listen. That's why the allegations associated with Jada caused such a strong reaction. These were not minor accusations. They were deeply serious claims involving exploitation and trauma. Even people who didn't believe them felt unsettled reading them. The impact was immediate. Claressa was no longer seen only as a champion under criticism. She was pulled into a narrative she never asked to be part of. People started asking uncomfortable questions. If someone knew this information for years, why speak now? Was it revenge? Anger? A breaking point after a friendship ended badly? At that moment, the love triangle fell apart. What remained was a complicated web. Remy and Papoose were still married. Rumors suggested both had separate situations. Claressa was reportedly engaged. This was no longer about romance. It was about power, image, and positioning. That's why one small incident, an alleged phone call moment, became symbolic. A voice heard unexpectedly, panic, a rushed hang-up. The internet replayed it endlessly until it became shorthand for the entire situation. From there, leaked texts followed, and leaked messages are especially brutal because they show how someone spoke when they thought no one else was listening. Public reaction turned harsh. People reduced Claressa's entire life to cruel phrases like undefeated in the ring, but lost in love. That line spread quickly because it was simple and humiliating. That's how viral narratives work. They flatten complex human experiences into a single sentence that ignores everything else. As this unfolded, another storyline quietly became more important: receipts. Not relationship receipts, but statements that could be seen as damaging to Claressa's career. When platforms began attaching claims about substance use or behavior that could affect her eligibility, the tone shifted again. This was no longer commentary, it was potential defamation. That's when Tasha K's role changed. She was no longer just reacting to drama, she was navigating legal risk. Receipts can destroy reputations, but they can also become evidence. The story involving Hawaii became part of the narrative. Claressa was allegedly seen there with Papoose. Another woman claimed she was also present. Remy had already suggested Claressa was not the only one. Whether accurate or not, the optics were damaging. Once the idea that Claressa was one of many took hold, public sympathy shifted. She was no longer framed as a new partner.